went so far, and it's my pleasure to be here right now. So I have a little small digression because I was walking down the street this morning and I saw something in Warsaw. And I was thinking, what is this like blue screen there? And I zoomed on it, and it says like, it's literally the first time from many years that I saw the blue screen. So maybe it was a hacker, I don't know. We'll see. Okay. So who am I? I'm the web dev and consultant that's working in Berlin right now, and I'm working mostly with the Angular, Electron, and Node/Express. You can contact me on the FRONTEND-CON Twitter handle, or you can just send me an email. I'm sorry for the keyboard because apparently my readonly.js doesn't work with this fancy presenter, so I need to use this one. So I work for the Western Isle Solutions, and let's go with the agenda. So what we will talk about today. So I started with the introduction, then we will talk a little bit about the state management, the problems that we currently have at the moment. Then I will go directly to the Redux and tell a little bit about the different parts of it, like the state, the reducers, the actions, the store, selectors, and then after that I will try to implement all those parts using the Angular library called Ngrx. And at the end I will tell you a little bit about the Redux DevTools. Okay, so this is the approach that we will try to take. So I hope that at the end of this presentation you will be further than step 4 in drawing a horse, because it's most tutorials that I have where like this, like you start with some basic steps, but then there's like a huge gap and you don't know what happened in between. Okay, the GitHub repository is already there, so you can check it out. Okay, so what are the current problems of the state management? Let's start with, it's really hard to manage the state in the front-end application, and you have a problem of the synchronization. You have the different kind of state. Some of the state is in the view, some of the state is in the model. You need to synchronize between them. You know the history in the Angular.js with the two-way data binding, and the state is basically all over the place, and there is no like common convention how to approach this problem, and this introduces a large margin for errors in the teams. So the problem is like I have a little bit of the state in the model A, then I have a little bit of state in the model B, then I have to synchronize between them, but the model B goes to model C, and the model C goes to view A, but the view A is dependent on the model A, and it's like really terrible to do this stuff. So I think that I have like one word that we will try to solve this problem, and this word is Redux. So let's go with the Redux. What is Redux basically? So the official definition from the Dan Abramov docs is like, this is the predictable state container. But what is the predictable state container? It's really hard to explain, but I will try to do it in the further slides. But what's also important here is like you can use the Redux. It was initially created for the Redux, for React library, but you can also use it in the Angular.js. You can use it with Angular or with Vue.js. If you are confused by now, don't worry. We will explain all of it. So let's start with the patterns. We all like the patterns because they are like common solutions for the problems that we have. And I would like to remind you about the observer pattern. So in the observer pattern we have like two entities. One is the observer and the second one is the subject. And we have like the relation, there is like one subject and many observers. So I can register the observer or unregister the observer and the subject, and what's important, I can notify my observers. So if something changes in the subject, I notify all of my observers, and they know this information already. Why I'm talking about the pattern? Because it's it's really similar to how the Redux works. So you can see that there's like a similarity. You have some kind of observer here, which is our component or our view, or just treat it like a UI. And then you have the store on the right, just like you had the subject here. And you communicate between the components and the store via the actions. So they are not going directly like in the pattern, but you do it through the actions dispatch and through the reducers, which I explained. Okay, so let's break down this big picture and let's start with the state. So state is nothing else like the plain JavaScript object. So you can have some properties there, like I wrote the string property. I have some list there, like the list is the array of the objects with maybe some tasks. It's literally the JavaScript object, nothing magical. Then we have the actions. And what are the actions? Again, those are simple objects. What's important with the actions, we have like the property type, that's always there for the action, and we have the optional property payload. And depends on what actions we want to dispatch, because they are basically describing what happens. Some user clicked the button, something happened on the UI state, and if something happens, sometimes I just want to inform the store that something happens, but sometimes I want to also include the payload. That would be, let's say, if I have the list, my payload would be the element of that list that I want to add to the state. And then there's like a concept of reducer. What is the reducer? Let's start with this term like that. Reducer is the pure function. And can anybody explain what the pure function is? Okay, so I will try my best to explain to you. Like the pure function is the function like you call it with the input, and the pure function only works inside of the scope of that function. So it only can reference any variables or properties inside of the scope. So that means that I cannot reference something that's outside of the scope of that function. If I call the pure function 1,000 times with the same input, I need to be sure that I will always get the same output. And this is like core principle of the Redux, because using the pure function allows us to have this predictable container that is in the definition. Those are the side effects. Like if something happens outside of the scope, you have the side effects, and the function is not pure anymore. So the rule of func here is also like you can think of it. If I have like a function and it does make sense to call this function without the return value, that would mean that the function is impure. Okay, so we know right now in the reducer they are pure functions. And these functions accept two parameters. The first parameter is the state, the previous state actually, and the second one is the action. And it doesn't matter which Redux do you use, if you use Redux library or if you use the Ngrx, you will always have like the switch case inside. And the case will be on the action type. And then based on that case, I will return the new slice of the state. So I have the previous state and also the property that I would like to change. In that case, I increase the counter by 1. And those three funny dots, this is the spread operator. And one of you could say why I haven't used here object assign, because let's say object assign is the part of ECMAScript 5 and spread operator is part of the ECMAScript 6, so I need to transpile it. Are you stupid or something? No, there's like a case for that. Because the case is that sometimes if you are not paying the good attention, object assign can mutate the state. And what I mean by that, we have like the object A with the property name, And we want to create a new object B. A new object B I create with the object assigned, and I put the A, and I put the property age 27. Okay, so we will get the object B, but the problem is that we just mutated the object A, and object A will contain now the age 27. And how you do it like this? Oh. This is the correct way you would do that with the object assigned. So you need to remember about this first parameter, which is the empty object, and then the object A, and then the property that you want. So if you log this out, then you don't change A anymore. But I would like to just use it without the need of remembering that stuff. So I just use the spread operator with the property, and it will behave exactly like this one. Okay, so I think we know everything about the reducer that we need to know right now, because with the spread operator and the new count property, we just got the new slice of the state. And what's also important here is the default, because we need to have like some case when none of our actions will match the case, and in that case, we will just return the previous state as it was, so nothing happens basically. Okay, so let's recap. I talked about the actions, and I will talk right now about the store. So this is the example of the store. You always create the store with the help of the reducers. In that example, we have only one reducer here, but nothing stops you from creating the store from more reducers. You will need to combine them. And after we created the store, we have some options, some methods that we can call on that store. And also, regardless of the implementation, maybe they will not be the same, but the principle is the same. So we need something to get the state basically from the store, and in the Redux library it's get state. Then you need to have something to be able to dispatch the action, which is stored.dispatch, and then it accepts the parameter object with the property of the type. So it's basically this object is the action, because as you remember, as I told, the actions are also JavaScript objects. And then you have something to subscribe to the store. So what it does basically, it will, in the callback function, it will notify you each time the state will be changed. So it would make sense, for example, in the callback function to run the get state again to get the updated state. And there are the last part of it, which are selectors. And the selectors are used to get something from the state. But it's like, what is really cool about this, that you can combine the selectors. So, for example, I have the first selector which gets me the entity from the state. Let's say I have the state with some property entities. So what that selector does, it will get me only the entities property from the state. And then again, the same thing will happen with the getSelectedID. And then let's say I want to have something like selected entity, but not the ID. What I do here, I create a new selector with the use of the previous two selectors. And what I get here is the results of those two selectors. And I can do some calculations with that results. And thanks to that, I just got the entity with the ID that I wanted. So are you with me still? I hopefully do not lose you, and coffee started to work after the lunch. Okay, so to recap, core concepts, state, an object, actions also an object, and the reducer, which is the pure function. Takes previous state and the actions as the argument. Okay, so how this workflow starts. So you start with the store. Then, in your component, you need to get some initial state from the store to be able to display some data in your component, in your view. And after that, let's say, none of your web pages are static, so something happens. Somebody clicked the button, and you need to inform about this event, the store. So you dispatch an action. That's something clicked, and you want to do something about this. What this action does, the action will go through the reducer, and then the circle will close because reducer based on the action will return the new state. And if the store gets the new state, it will notify all of the observers or all of the components that subscribe to that store. So then you will get your updated state in your view again. Okay, so that was the theoretical introduction, and let's see now how the example implementation of that concept would look like. And I will try to do this with the Angular library, which is called Ngrx, which is a little bit different from the Redux library. And this is how it looks like. So they took the Redux and added Rx.js on top of it. So they added this observable data streams in order to like supercharge the Redux, which really works well together. Okay, so the context for the application is that I came here from Berlin, and also there are some other speakers who came here from Berlin, and we had really huge problems to get here because I don't know if you know, but Air Berlin airline is going bankrupt, and I thought to myself what I can do about this. So I made the app, and the app is like the petition to save the Air Berlin. And what it basically does here, you can vote for the petition or you can vote against the petition, and also you can start over. So if let's see, if I click this button, I voted for, so count of the votes that are for increase. And if I vote against, this count will decrease again. And also, what I can do, I can start over with my voting. Which what would it do is basically reset the voting. So this is a really simple application. I have the main component, and I have some material components here. Nothing magic. So let's take a look in the code. Okay, so I will start with the module, and I need somehow to create the store. So what you do in the Angular, you create it with the for root function, and then it accepts the object with the key value pair, where the key is the property on your state that you would like to have, and the value is the reducer that should handle that part of the state. Okay. So if I have set up the store, then I really like to start from the actions point of view. So what I can do, what is dynamic in my application? So I have basically three actions in that application. I have the vote for, I have the vote against, and I have the vote reset. And in Ngrx, the actions are Typescript classes. So as you can see here, I have the class for vote for action, and it always has the interface action. But this interface is really simple. We can check the interface. The interface only has the type string on it. So I have the action with the type, which is vote for. I have the same against action with the type, which is vote against. And what's more interesting here is the vote reset, because not only I have the type, but I have the payload here. And in the Ngrx, what you do is you will pass the payload in your constructor. And I use the shortcut here because this public payload is basically the same as if you do like public payload here. And then I do like this. And here this payload equals payload. So it's exactly the same. I just use the shortcut from the Typescript Okay, and the last part of this action, which is really interesting, is the types. As you can see here, I have the vote action types, which can be of the type vote for action, vote against, or vote reset. And this science says that this type is like a union type of this Typescript. So it can be either of that, which will be really handy in the reducer that I will show you. Okay, so we understand the action here. Then let's take a look at the reducer implementation. How do I implement the reducer? I start with the interface of my state, and it's really simple state. It's just a count of type number. Then I need some initial state, which will be 0 in that case. And then in the reducer, I pass that state with the default parameter of the initial state. And then I pass the action. And my action can have different types, and you can see here that my Visual Studio Code shows me that this can be either of that type. And then, of course, like I told you, there's like a switch case with the cases for the actions. And in the case of the vote for or vote against, I will just return the new slice of the state. In the case of the vote reset, I actually use the action payload property to assign it to the count. And I also have the default clause. Okay. So far, so good. Let's go back to the component right now. So what we saw is the store, actions, and reducers. But the last part is like, how did I get my initial state in the component? Because I created the store, but how it ended up in the component. So you do that with the selectors. So as you can see, I wrote here the selector query, which accepts the state, and I'm interested only in, oh, she was first. And what I get here is like state votes count. And then there's like a really interesting method in the Ngrx, which is called select. And what it does here, if I pass the selector query, I get the observable, I will be notified. So as you know, the observables are lazy, so I need to subscribe on it. And what I do in the subscribe, what I get is like, I pass the votes, and I just assign the votes to my component. And in the view, I will just show the votes here. Okay. There's like an interesting concept in the Angular, because I don't need, there's like one problem here with that subscribe. Because I subscribed in the ng-on-init, which will be called after the component is initialized. But the problem is I forgot to unsubscribe here, and in the ng-on-destroy, and if I do not do this, then I can have like potential memory leaks. So there's like a really cool feature in the Angular called async pipe. And let's try to rewrite this using the async pipe. So I don't need the subscribe anymore. I will assign this observable to my votes, but with the observable, this is the convention that you use to describe the observable. So you see this is not the number anymore, but the observable of type number. And then, how do I use it in the template? I just need to use my observable votes, and then use the async pipe. Let's see. Okay. It works as it should be. Okay. So right now, we have the basically working application, and what I can show you is how you can use it with the help of the Redux DevTools. So in order to set it up, you go to the module, and you just write this store DevTools module instrument. You would basically, in the real application, you would only run this during the development, so you could use something like environment question to just use it for the development environment. Okay, so we have the Redux DevTools set up. And if you will install the Google Chrome plugin for the DevTools, you will have the Redux here. So let's refresh it. So I have some actions here. Okay, so how does it look like? Here are the actions that are dispatched at the moment, and the first one that is always dispatched is this Ngrx init action. And I can see also the current state. Oh. Okay. So now my state is the votes with the count of 1. And what I can do here is as soon as I trigger the action, you see that the action has been triggered in the DevTools. And also the action vote against has been also triggered. I can even go to the minus. And then I can basically start over. What's nice here, if you go to the diff, it will show you the previous state and what exactly has been changed because of that action, if I go and highlight this. And what's really, really cool here is this time travel. So what I do here, I will start from the beginning, and because the Redux is predictable, I could do this like this. So you can see that it starts with the vote and goes action by action, and you can actually see the changes in the view. I mean, how cool is that? Am I the only one excited here? Okay, so this is the basically Redux DevTools here. And then, let's go back to our presentation. So as I told you, the Redux DevTool was originally implemented only for the Redux library, but they also allowed it to for the Ngrx. Okay, so what would be the basic takeouts of this presentation? So I thought that if I just will tell you, you will probably forget. So I thought, like, how can I tell you so you will maybe remember? So I would need some guy who is like definitely the guy who, when he will say something, it's like an oracle. So I thought that my friend Paul will tell you something about this. So, what is the single source of truth here? This is the principle that says state of whole app is stored in object tree within a single store. Then, the second takeout is the state is read-only. And the only way to change the state is to emit an action. And the last takeout is that the changes are made via the pure functions, because state is transformed by the actions called reducers. Okay. So you have the three principles here again. So I hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and this is it basically. And there's like the last code that was written by some guy who was working in Angular 1, because like we need to remember that the Redux is not like the golden hammer that you can use always. Sometimes if you have really good solution of managing your state that is really working for you and your team, maybe it doesn't make sense to go Redux if the application is not big enough. But it's really nice to have some common conventions, and if you are working on it, to just share the materials, and if there will be any new team members, then it's really easy for them to catch up the speed. Okay, thank you very much.